does she stay? Why would anyone stay with a man who beats her? I'm not a psychiatrist, a social worker, or even an expert on domestic violence. I'm just one woman with a story to tell. On average, more than 1 out of 3 women every year will be raped, stalked, or physically abused in the United States. With these staggering statistics, it's astounding to see that society has yet to remove the taboo of talking about domestic violence. Victims need to be empowered and lifted up if we are to end this cycle and stop asking why domestic violence victims don't leave, by Leslie Morgenstein. I was 22. I just graduated from Harvard College. I moved to New York City for my first job as an editor and writer at 17 magazine. I had my first apartment, my first little green American Express card, and I had this very big secret. My secret was there was this gun loaded with hollow bullets pointed at my head by the man who I thought was my soulmate many, many times. The man who I loved more than anyone on earth threatened to kill me more times than I can imagine. I'm here to tell you the story of crazy love, a psychological trap disguised as love, one that many women and even a few men fall into every year. It may even be your story. Now, I would have told you that I was the last person on earth who would stay with the man who beats me. But in fact, I was a very typical victim because of my age. Women ages 16 to 24 are more likely to be domestic violence victims of women of other ages. And over 500 women every year are killed by abusive partners, boyfriends, and husbands in the United States. I was also a very typical victim because I knew nothing about domestic violence, its warning signs, or its patterns. I first met Connor on a cold, rainy January night. He sat next to me on the New York City subway. He told me 2 things. One was that he too had just graduated from an Ivy League school, and that he worked at a big Wall Street bank. But what made the biggest impression on me our first meeting was that he was smart and funny. He seemed so sweet. One of the smartest things Connor did from the very beginning was to make me feel like I was the dominant partner. He did this by idolizing me. He wanted to know everything about me, my friends, my family, my hopes and dreams. Connor believed in me in a way that no one ever else had. He also created this magical atmosphere of trust by telling me that he had been savagely and repeatedly physically abused by his stepfather, and he had spent 20 years rebuilding his life, which is why that Ivy League school degree and his job at Wall Street meant so much to him. If you would have told me that this smart, loving, funny man would one day dictate what clothes I wore, who my friends were, or where I spent Christmas, I would have laughed at you, because there was not a hint of violence in Connor in the beginning. I didn't know that the first step in a domestic violence situation is to seduce and charm the victim. I also didn't know that the second step is to isolate the victim. Now, Connor didn't come home one day and say, hey, you know, all this Romeo and Juliet stuff has been great, but it's time to move into the next step where I isolate you and abuse you. No, Connor came home one Friday night and told me that he had quit his job, his dream job. He said he had quit his job because of me. Because I made him feel so safe and protected, he did not need to prove himself to Wall Street anymore. And he just wanted to leave Manhattan and his dysfunctional family. The last thing I wanted to do was to leave New York and my dream job. But I thought you made sacrifices for your soulmate. So I packed my bags and and we left Manhattan together. I had no idea I was falling into crazy love, that I was walking head first into a carefully laid physical, financial, psychological trap. The next step in a domestic violence situation is to introduce the threat of violence and see how she reacts. That's where those guns come in. When we moved to New Jersey, the place where Connor was supposed to feel so safe, he brought 3 guns with him. One he kept in the glove compartment of our car, one he kept under our bed, and one he kept in his pocket at all times. He told me he needed those guns for the trauma he had faced as a child, but really those guns were a sign for me. And even though Connor had not yet laid a hand on me, my life was in grave danger every minute of every day. Connor first physically attacked me 5 days before our wedding. I was working on a freelance writing assignment and I got frustrated, and Connor used my anger as an excuse to take both of his hands and to squeeze my neck so tightly that I could not breathe or scream, and repeatedly hit my head against the wall. 5 days later, 10 bruises on my neck had faded, and I put on my mother's wedding dress, and I married him. I was sure we were going to live happily ever after, because I loved him and he loved me, and it was an isolated incident and it was never going to happen again. It happened 2 more times on our honeymoon. The first time I was driving to a secret beach and I got lost, and he hit the side of my head so hard that the other side hit the car window. The second time was on the way home from our honeymoon, and he got angry by traffic and threw a cold Big Mac in my face. Connor proceeded to beat me once or twice a week for the next 2.5 years of our marriage. I was mistaken in thinking I was unique and alone in this situation. The CDC reports that 15 million children every year are abused. 15 million. So actually, I was in good company. Back to my question. Why does she stay? The answer is easy. I didn't know Connor was abusing me. Even though he held those guns to my head, pushed me down the steps, pulled the car key ignition out of the car as I drove down the highway, I never once saw myself as a battered wife, but instead as a strong woman in love with a deeply troubled man. And I was the only one who could help Connor face his demons. Another question everyone always asks is, why didn't I just leave? Why didn't I just walk out? For me, this is the most painful question anyone could ask, because we victims know something you usually don't. It's incredibly dangerous to leave an abuser, because his final step is to kill us. Over 70% of domestic violence murders happen after she's gotten out, after she's left, because then the abuser has nothing left to lose. And still, we ask, why didn't she just leave? I was able to leave because of one final beating that broke through my denial. I realized that Connor was going to kill me if I let him. So I told everyone, my friends, my family, total strangers, and I'm here today because you all saved me. We tend to stereotype victims as grisly headlines, self-destructive women, damaged goods. The question of why does she stay is code for it's her fault for staying. I was able to break my silence, and I'm still breaking my silence today. It's my way of helping other people, and it's my final request to you. Talk about what you've heard here today. Abuse only thrives on silence.